Alright, working on Algebra BB8. This is another assignment that you should get in the A range fairly quickly. And I think it'll be one of our last lessons of the year. Only 4 questions because they're pretty simple. You need to know what the zero product property is, and what that basically means is when you factor something down, one or the other is going to equal 0. Okay? So what that means is, so if I'm going to factor this guy out, ignore this part for a second. Okay, we're only looking at the y squared minus 24y. What can you pull out of both? Well, hopefully you can say you can pull out a y. And then what you're left with is, since you pulled one y out here, you got a y left, minus, and then you pulled a y out here, so you got 24. So out of your factor, either this is 0 or this is 0. So you're going to do y, since you pulled this out, either that's going to equal 0 or 24, or y minus 24 equals 0. And then you solve. So y is already 0, so that's already solved. And then you got to get the y by itself, so you add 24, and you get y equals 24. So it's going to ask you for the answers. It's going to say, what are the two answers? Well, one of the two answers, it says solve it, writing it as an improper fraction, integer, proper fraction, doesn't matter. And then it'll say, write it by separating it with commas. So you'll say, okay, one of the answers was 0, so you'd put 0, and the other answer is 24, not 42, 24. So there's your two answers, 0, 24. Alright, so doing another one, we'll kind of skip 2, we'll go back up to 2. Doing the same thing, what can you pull out of both? Hopefully you said a W. And so you're left with a W plus 17 on the inside. Separate them out, W equals 0. Then we go around side by side. You're technically supposed to do W plus 17 equals 0. So W equals 0. So there's one of my answers, 0, comma, and then subtract your 17 to get it away from your W. So you get W equals negative 17. So the other one is negative 17. So there's your two answers. All right, now working up here, got an extra. Can't really solve it the same way. Okay, the previous one we just pulled out a variable and that was it. Now we actually have to do a little bit of factoring like we did in the past. Okay, the reason we worked up so much factoring, it's first off, it's very vital going into your Algebra 2 class. Okay, if you don't know it, you'll be a step behind. So working on k squared minus 9k plus 14, what can you pull out? Hopefully you remember. You're looking for the factors of 14. Okay, so what are the factors of 14? I'll write them up here. 1 and 14. And then 2 times 7. Okay, so what can you do to get negative 9? Now you got a negative on the inside and a positive on the outside, which means both numbers are going to be negative. Okay, because a negative times a negative makes a positive. So when you factor it back out, this will become a positive. So it means two numbers will be negative. So if I had a negative 1 and negative 14, that gives me negative 15. That doesn't work. Negative 2 and negative 7, though, give me negative 9. So what I'm going to do is when I factor this one, this should bring back some very, very good memories. Breaking down the k, so k in front of both, and then a negative 2 and a negative 7. So whenever I multiply this back out, so if I did k times k gives me k squared, k times negative 7 gives me negative 7k. So I'm going to write that real quick. It's not part of the way you solve, but I'm just helping you visualize. And k times negative 7 gives us negative 7k. And then do the next factoring, negative 2 times k, negative 2k, negative 2 times negative 7 gives us 14. So there's our 14. There's our 14. There's our k squared, and then negative 7k minus 2k gives us negative 9k. Now, this isn't part of the problem. Okay? That is just showing you how to help you out. So going back up here, zero product property. That means either this is 0 or this is 0. That's all you got to do is set it equal to 0. So k minus 2 equals 0, and then k minus 7 equals 0. So if I move the 7 to that side by adding 7, that gives me k equals 7. And then if I did the same thing, move the 2 over there by adding 2. And remember, why did you add on both? Because they're both negative. So moving a negative, you got to add it. So negative 2, positive 2 gives me positive 2 over here. Those will cancel out, leaves my k by itself. So your two answers, 2 and 7. All right, now last problem. Doing same thing. What are my factors of 12? So factors of 12 are 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. Okay, so kind of the same concept. Back numbers negative, front numbers, or sorry, back numbers positive, front numbers negative. So what you want to do is two negatives times each other gives me a positive, but since this number is negative, means something's got to be negative. Okay, this tells me that both numbers are both negative. This tells me one of them are negative. Is negative. All right. I guess that's why I don't teach English. So we do 3 and 4, so they're both negative. That gives us negative 7. If we did 2 and 6, both negative, gives me negative 8. And then if I did 1 and 12, both negative, gives me negative 13. I need a negative 13, so I'm using 1 and 12. So t's in front, because we break down t squared. So this tells me negative 1 and negative 12. And breaking those back down, if I did it like I did up here, would give me t squared, negative 1t, negative 12t, negative 1t makes negative 13t, and then negative 1 times negative 12 gives me 12. And so, zero product property, this equals 0, t minus 12 equals 0. Add my 1, t is 1. Add my 12, t is 12. So t is either 1 or 12. And there's your two answers.